Hi everyone. Ukraine and the United States share a complex and evolving relationship shaped by history, geopolitics, and shared strategic interests. Understanding this relationship requires a deep dive into both nations' past interactions, from early diplomatic engagements to recent events that have redefined their alliance. The origins of the Ukraine US relationship can be traced back to Ukraine's long struggle for independence from the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union. Throughout the 20th century, the United States maintained an interest in the fate of Ukraine, particularly during periods of turmoil. The American government did not recognize the Soviet annexation of Ukraine as legitimate and consistently promoted self determination for all Soviet republics. Ukrainian immigrants in the United States also played a significant role in lobbying for international awareness of Ukraine's plight under Soviet rule. Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union in August 1991, following the failed coup in Moscow that signaled the collapse of Soviet power. Yedina Yon. The United States was among the first nations to recognize Ukraine's independence, establishing formal diplomatic relations in December 1991. This period marked the beginning of a new chapter, with America assisting Ukraine in transitioning to a market economy, strengthening democratic institutions, and ensuring nuclear disarmament. One of the earliest and most critical agreements between the two countries was the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. Under this agreement, Ukraine voluntarily gave up its massive stockpile of nuclear weapons inherited from the Soviet Union in exchange for security assurances from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia. The memorandum promised Ukraine protection against threats or use of force against its sovereignty, a commitment that would later be put to the test. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Ukraine and the US maintained cordial but cautious relations. While Ukraine sought closer integration with Western institutions, it also maintained ties with Russia, balancing its geopolitical position. The US provided Ukraine with economic assistance, supported anti-corruption efforts, and promoted democratic governance. The Orange Revolution of 2004 was a pivotal moment in US-Ukraine relations, as America strongly backed the pro-democracy movement that led to the annulment of fraudulent election results and the victory of Viktor Yushchenko, a pro-Western candidate. However, political instability in Ukraine remained a concern. Corruption, weak institutions, and internal divisions slowed the country's progress toward full integration with the West. The election of Viktor Yanukovych in 2010 marked a shift toward closer ties with Russia, causing tension in US-Ukraine relations. This tension peaked in 2013 when Yanukovych abandoned an association agreement with the European Union in favor of stronger economic ties with Russia. The decision sparked mass protests known as the Euromaidan movement, which ultimately led to his removal in 2014. The 2014 Ukraine Revolution drastically altered US-Ukraine relations. The United States openly supported Ukraine's new leadership, condemned Russia's annexation of Crimea, and imposed sanctions on Moscow. This period saw an increase in American military and financial aid to Ukraine, including training for its armed forces and assistance in modernizing its defense capabilities. In the years that followed, the US-Ukraine relationship continued to strengthen. American policymakers saw Ukraine as a critical buffer against Russian expansionism. The conflict in eastern Ukraine, where Russian-backed separatists waged war against the Ukrainian government, further solidified US support for Kiev. Economic sanctions on Russia intensified, and US military assistance expanded to include lethal aid, such as anti-tank missiles. Under the Trump administration, Ukraine remained a key topic in US foreign policy, but it also became entangled in domestic American politics. The 2019 impeachment of Donald Trump stemmed from allegations that he pressured Ukraine to investigate political rival Joe Biden in exchange for military aid. Despite the political controversy, bipartisan support for Ukraine remained strong in Congress, ensuring continued assistance. With the election of Joe Biden in 2020, US-Ukraine relations entered another critical phase. Biden, who had been heavily involved in Ukraine policy during his tenure as vice president under Barack Obama, reaffirmed America's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. The relationship took on even greater significance in 2022 when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The invasion led to an unprecedented level of American support for Ukraine. The US provided billions of dollars in military aid, humanitarian assistance, and economic support. Advanced weaponry, including artillery systems, drones, and air defense systems, was supplied to help Ukraine resist Russian aggression. The US also played a key role in coordinating international sanctions against Russia, further isolating Moscow economically and diplomatically. Beyond military assistance, the United States supported Ukraine on the diplomatic front, rallying NATO and other allies to provide aid. American officials made repeated visits to Kiev, demonstrating unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Meanwhile, US defense contractors ramped up production of weapon systems to replenish both Ukrainian and American stockpiles. Despite strong American backing, challenges remain. The war in Ukraine has strained global supply chains, increased energy prices, and led to debates within the US about the long-term feasibility of sustaining aid. Some political factions in the US have raised concerns about the cost of supporting Ukraine, arguing that domestic issues should take priority. However, the majority consensus in Washington remains in favor of continued assistance to prevent Russian expansionism and uphold international order. Looking toward the future, Ukraine and America's relationship will likely remain strong, but it will depend on political shifts in both nations. The outcome of Ukraine's struggle against Russia, the stability of its government, and America's strategic interests will all shape the next phase of their alliance. Efforts to rebuild Ukraine, integrate it further into Western institutions like NATO and the EU, and address corruption will be key factors in maintaining strong ties. In conclusion, the relationship between Ukraine and the United States has evolved from early diplomatic recognition to a deep strategic partnership. While challenges persist, the shared goal of defending democracy and countering aggression has solidified their bond. As history continues to unfold, the alliance between Ukraine and America will remain a defining factor in global geopolitics.